Well, the funny thing is too, is you sit there and you go, all right, what's the end goal of being a coach, right? Like, what's the end goal of trying to, have an impact on somebody's career? And I say this all the time. I was like, my goal is to have somebody not need me anymore, right? Like, and I think from a sheer egotistical standpoint, I think a lot of people in today's game want to be needed, or even in just the world, they want to be needed, right? Like, they want to be necessary in people's lives. And I would argue the opposite is true for the best coaches that I ever had. And the reason I say that is not from my standpoint. Like, I feel like the more I don't need a coach, the more I need a coach. And I know it's counterintuitive and all that stuff, but like, if you are a positive influence on somebody's life, career, whatever, that's when realistically, like, that person's going to turn to you more and more. And that's where the real stuff can happen, right? Like, that's where and I talk about trust bridges all the time, like building a bridge of trust as a coach to have an athlete feel like they can open up to you. That's the biggest challenge. And I think ultimately the thing that needs to happen the most.
Well, to interject there, C, too, I mean, you having been in a major league, clubhouse and being around that dynamic and working through the minor leagues and Tewks, you as well. I mean, you've worked with, countless, major leaguers and minor leaguers and college players. How many times are you in the cage and the conversation you start and the trust you start with has nothing to do with like that guy's swing? Literally. I mean, it's like a vulnerability factor you have to work through first. It's like getting the guy, like getting whoever's in front of you to know that we are here for your best interest first and foremost. It's like that is the benchmark for me with all coaching experiences. Even when I was in the private sector, it's like someone will come in and you get somebody that's all excited to work with you, and it's like the first however many sessions is trying to figure out the person and trying to build that trust so that the player can be vulnerable and talk about whatever could be restricting their I don't want to say their moves, but their mindset, how their approach, what's going on in game or what could be carrying over in game. I just find that to be honestly like probably as important, the soft skill being almost as important as the hard skill, especially early on in coaching relationships.
So how much of it would you say starts with mental before physical? Like if you had to give a number to it, like a percent.
A number? I mean, I would probably say a lot of the adjustments. There's never an adjustment that doesn't start without a mental cue or something relative to the player's mentality. I would say I'm not a big believer in just jumping right into movement or cues unless we have an idea of like where the mindset or the mentality behind the player, because obviously intention is going to drive action, right? So half the time it could just be, hey man, we got to get going and anticipate X, or we got to get started earlier, or hey, why aren't you getting started? Well, I'm finding myself in between pitches a lot. That's why I feel like I'm late. So a lot of the movements that happen down chain are relative to this hitter specifically, maybe just being indecisive and not committing to a speed or a location or whatever the game plan is for him. So I would say there's really no adjustment that happens without an adjustment to the mentality. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but that's kind of where my standpoint is.
That's awesome. I used to always ask players, what pitch do you fear? What pitch do you fear? What's giving you trouble? Yeah. And I think that question, it leads you to, what mistake are they trying to cover? That's probably causing all their other problems. Because if the fastball in is the one beating them, then they're cheating to it and it's exposing them to everything else. Or if the breaking ball is killing them, then that has its own set. Each hitter has a story, as you said, and getting to the root of it. It's transactional versus relational with regard to this dynamic, where if a player just comes in and a lot of stuff, with me, when my stuff started going off, I started getting a lot of like transactional situations happening where people just want to come to me. They want to come to me for answers. Like, hey, just tell me what to do. And I was like, dude, that's not what I'm about. Like, I want to know you as a player. I want you to be able to call me during the season, and I want to know what makes you tick. Not like, hey, remember that one thing I told you that one time that worked in the cage?
Yeah.
Like, I need to be able to invest in you and have a relationship with you, not just tell you movements with your body and movements with your bat. It's so much deeper. And I guess there's a role for the transactional thing if that's what the player wants, but It's not what motivated me whatsoever. And I didn't feel like I could help a player to the best of my ability without knowing them as a person and knowing, you know, where they came from with their athletic career and what they were trying to achieve. And like, are you trying to hit for more power? Are you trying to hit for more average? Are you trying to improve your on base percentage? Like, what is your motivation? What's driving this? Because typically the guys that come to you are the ones that are struggling, right? They're not, they're hitting 350 with a bunch of homers. They're not coming to talk to you. They're happy and they're content usually. That kind of performance. So you're dealing with failure out of the gate. So
you brought up a good point about understanding the why, right? Like understanding the why things happen. Like the funny thing is you know, you know, through your experience, like any level, that doesn't matter. Like, did you feel like, and Bobby, I guess I'm asking you a question too. Did you feel like most people were like understood the why or were consumed with the why as much as I think we became at some point, or no?
Are you talking about the players themselves?
Yeah,
like
just in general, like players, coaches, anything, like what, anything.
It's a good question. I would say it was very inconsistent in the private sector for me. My sentiment with Bobby exactly. Like we had some guys that, you know, or players I should say, that would come in and it was very specific what they wanted, or they had a kind of, I don't want to call it a single track mind, but they were like, you know, they wanted to be the best they could. Others, you know, just wanted to survive and maybe make their freshman team, you know, and others were just, you know, then there were some players that were coming in and maybe they were on their last leg and it was like, hey, I need an adjustment here, or my time, you know, I'm closer to the end than I am the beginning type of thing. So I think a lot of it was driven by where the players were at that point. You know, I think at the professional level, what's interesting to me is, you know, and again, this goes back to the individual. With some of the young guys that get up or cruise through to the big leagues really fast, I think a lot of those guys, they're just so talented. Like they are immensely talented. So the why for them and like why they're doing things is kind of, I don't necessarily know if it's if it's something they even consider at the time. And then they get to the highest level and it's like, whoa, wait a second. Like, why do I need to do this drill again? And it's, you know, you have to walk them through that process, but it happens pretty routinely at the, you know, for us, the big league level is you're always having to like reaffirm the why, you know, and just keep that at like the center of the conversation. And again, some of it's just because the guys are so talented. They get up and they're able to just do things other people can't. So they never really had to consider it. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. They, if they've never encountered failure, if they've never really, really struggled, and there's guys that are that talented, it's like I feel like you need to go through that failure to find your true identity, to find conviction. You know, most guys that I worked with, most of them just needed to be like, F everybody. This is my career. I'm taking ownership. This is me. I need to own this. And once they did that, once they took full accountability and they said, you know what, I'm going to listen to everybody, but ultimately this is my thing. I got to make it happen. And, you know, that's when they start committing to pitches. That's when they start buying into mindset and approach. And, you know, if they have a game plan, they're going to sell out to it, but not panic if it fails for a given day. You know, they're more committed to the mindset when that happens. And until that happens, everybody's kind of on the fence. And the guys that have made that transition, it's so obvious and it's so clear that they have an identity. And like, I think I saw that with Chris in Toronto, where we've talked about this on the pickle before, where with the Twins, he didn't feel confident, didn't feel like he could be himself, was kind of like unsure, like in this constant state of unknown. And when he got to Toronto, he just got to be himself. And that's when players perform their best anyway. So it's just that mindset. Like it's the guy that believes they're the dude before they are the dude. And then their actions show it and their demeanor shows it. All the non-verbal stuff speaks so loudly with those guys.